What if we weren't created to do life alone? In this around the table conversation, Sherry, Robin, and I talk about the significance of experiencing life, love, and freedom in the context of a redemptive community. Let's dive in.
I just want to say welcome to the Deepening Communities Around the Table Zoom. And last month we were talking about how significant listening is and how it affects our lives and relationships. And that was a great conversation. So we will get that posted because that's not posted yet. But tonight we want to explore the idea of not doing life alone, that we were created to do life in community, that we're created for journeying together, for caring well for each other's hearts in the beautiful, ordinary, and messy moments of life. But before we go there, I'd love to hear, Robin, how are you coming in tonight?
I am coming in feeling refreshed because we just had a beautiful couple days. Maggie and Sherry and I were invited to the beach with our friends, Mike and Mara, and they hosted us and took us out on their beautiful boat out near Emerald Isle. And we got to be on the boat and the beach, a little island out there. And it just was a gorgeous day. And I was reminding myself as we were on the boat, just like, notice the beauty, notice the colors. And Maggie, I know you were doing the same thing. Look at the different color blues. I took pictures of Maggie taking pictures. It's just sweet and good and refreshing. Good for my soul. Yeah. How about you, Maggie?
I was going to say the same, refreshed, just from getting out to have toes in the sand, seeing water. It was absolutely beautiful. So came home and was like, my house is a mess. So in my refreshed energy, I actually did some cleaning, which is sadly too rare for me. We would love to know about y'all, however I want to say it. How are you coming in tonight? Let us know in the chat. And Sherry, how about you?
Well, Maggie, it's funny that you went home and cleaned. And I thought, well, no surprise you went home and cleaned, right? Because your husband and kids were home without you. We were thinking about that for times we come back and our families have been home without us. It just needs that touch that only we can bring. But I'm coming in somewhat refreshed also. I took a nap, honestly, when I got home. And so I'm still waking up from that. Honestly, I feel like. So, but it was good. It was good to be in the sunshine. It was good. The sand, the water, just all of it. And the conversations, in anticipation of this Zoom. And because we can't not, we find ourselves talking about this all the time.
Yeah.
Because it matters, because it's important to us. It's what we love to talk about. One of the many things we love to talk about. So we just got to thinking and talking about how we are all part of so many different groups and communities, whether they're church groups or parent-teacher groups or Bible studies and homeschool groups. And I mean, when you think about it, even our families are communities. They're groups that we belong to. They are places that we find ourselves, and they each have their purpose and their intention, and they're not all the same.
Right.
And I love that part of what we were talking about this last 36 hours together. And so I find myself thinking, and we found ourselves talking about just what is knowing the purpose of the group. What is this group for? And we were talking about how for Monday night group, one of the women who were new to the group said, what is this group for? What is the purpose? Is it to study whatever book we're going through? Is it to get to know each other? And can it be both? Right. So the significance of just knowing what is the purpose of the group you're part of and what assumptions are we making coming in?
Right. And defining some of those things and stating some of those things, because we want to be intentional. We want to do it well, even if it is to be open and real and authentic and come as you are. There's still with great intention. We want to do that. We want to do that well. So
because clear is kind.
Clear is kind.
Right. Being clear about the intention and the purpose is kind.
Yeah.
And so tonight what we want to talk about is redemptive communities and what redemptive communities are, how they are different than some of those other communities we just mentioned, how just the importance and significance of being known and seen and loved and safe is what we're created for. It's
Mhm.
what we're meant for. It's where we thrive and where we flourish. And Robin, you had mentioned a sign that you saw in a cafe in a ministry in
Yes.
Tennessee. You want to give
Yeah.
that quote? Because that's a good one.
Yeah, it says community is the oldest form of healing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me really stop and think, what is it about community that offers healing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really caused us to consider and to think and to, with great intention, be how do we create spaces
Mm-hmm.
for that, for authenticity, for sharing, for knowing and being known in a way that brings healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah. And how in the midst of that, we've learned and experienced through, and we've shared through the deepening journey, through the deepening weekend, how it's in community that we are wounded. And it's how we're also healed in community, in that
Mhm.
relationship.
Right.
So we need it. We must need it. And we were talking about how coming out of COVID, going through that whole experience of 2021 and even into 22, how that mandated isolation has affected the way that we've moved. Even when we were in communities, that requirement to not be in community,
Mm-hmm.
we found ourselves in habits and ways. So moving back towards communities has been hard because it's like we fell into one set of habits and routines, and now it's a shift again. And we see the ache. You know, we see the ache as we talk to different women of just longing to be back in community.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, just Robin, as we were talking about wanting to go back to, because so often we like to go back to the Genesis. How did this start? Why is this what Zoweh is about? Why is our mission statement redemptive communities everywhere? Why? Where did that start for you, the Hearts Group?
Right. I remember it was right around one of the deepening weekends, and it was in the earlier years when it felt like it was just me and Dana we were bringing Dana in to help me give talks, to share, to speak. And my mom at the time was coming in and giving talks, but it was kind of this once a year drop in, offer this, and then kind of back to work. And I remember Michael sharing with me, he's like, I wonder if it would be something that you want to think about, intentionally inviting women to do this with you during the year, in community, in friendship, because that's what he does. That's what our husbands do together.
Yeah.
Throughout the year with great intention. They work together, but they also get together outside of work and share stories and get to know each other.
At least once a week.
At least
if
once
not
a week.
A couple of times a week.
Yeah, right. And then for their encounter weekends, they're offering out of friendship and relationship and authentic friendship. So I thought that is a great idea. And so I started thinking about and praying about who would I want to do this with? Who do I want in friendship really to be intentional with? And so I started thinking of women that I knew. For me, it was easier to think of who do I just want to know? Who do I want to get to spend time with, that it's not just going to happen unless, you know how we always say, let's get together for coffee. Yes, let's do that. And it never happens.
Right.
So I picked 7 women from different places in my life in this area that I really wanted to know and spend time with, intentional time with. And I knew if I didn't, it wouldn't happen. And I knew that we were working towards being able to offer this at the deepening weekend. So it was both for friendship and friendship that was missional.
Right.
So I picked 7 women. They didn't know each other. I think a couple of them did, but loosely. And I invited them into this, and I invited them to a restaurant a special restaurant. They didn't know why they were coming, but I invited them into this. And at the table, around the table, it was a round table and there were 8 of us, 7 women and myself. And I laid out for them what I was hopeful for. I was hopeful for intentional friendship to do. And I can't remember if we started with once a week or every other week. I think it was once a week, and then with the intention of once a year being able to move and offer this at the deepening weekend. So it was missional, it was intentional, but really my heart was for friendship. And I didn't know what they were going to say. And if they would, I anticipated most of them would say, this sounds great, but I am too busy. Life is too full. But for some reason, all 7 of them said yes. And for years, we did that. We met once a week and we started by telling our story, each one of our stories. And so we each took a week. Some of us, it took 2 weeks. Some of us, it took 3 weeks to share our story with each other, because if knowing and being known is the idea, that's where we wanted to start. And that beautifully set us on a path for 6 years of getting to know each other, moving in friendship, spending time together in intentional community, and then being able to offer that at the deepening weekend.
And so it was interesting because I heard you mention the things that might come against, that you were afraid they might say no because they were busy, because maybe that's not what they wanted, because you were so clear about what you were hopeful for.
Yeah, right. I was afraid that they would say no when I talked about the intention of the mission, because I mostly, to be very honest, I really just longed for the friendship. And so I thought, well, what if they don't want to do this missionally with me? But
and
so
yet they were in.
Right. So yeah, that was those were the 2 things I think that I was concerned about that could come against it. And for any number of reasons.
Right. Because it's not easy.
No.
And there's so much set against it, against the being known, against the opportunity to be in a group of women and be known and not check out because of your own story, because of what bumps into your story, because of familiar ways that don't feel good, for anything that might align with, I knew it, it's not safe, it's not this, it's not that.
This always happens to me. Right.
And so did you encounter that in that community? And how did you move in some of those bump ups, some of those things that bumped into your story?
I would say it was a pretty smooth ride for a few years.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It was pretty smooth. But then I will say it started to get harder. It started to get messier. And I don't think we did it well. To be honest, we didn't have conversations around it. We didn't know how to. We didn't know how to listen well or confront well. We just didn't. And until it absolutely blew up 6 years in. And so.
And sometimes there's an ending to things like that.
Yes.
To relationships like that. And it's a healthy ending for the health of.
Right. And yet it was a huge loss because, I can't go into it, but the breaking that happened felt like it could have been avoided. I don't know if we could have handled it differently. Hindsight is 2020, but it felt like a huge loss for the 6 of us in the group that wanted so much to keep meeting, but that it's messy. It is messy. So I don't know how we could have done it differently. I know we could have. We didn't know then some of what we're learning now.
And sometimes it's a Barnabas situation where you just have to go different ways. And it's okay to say, you know what, this is a good parting place. You long for something else. You're in a different place. Right. So it's okay to.
Right. And you know the situation. So you know that is
day.
Right.
To say it's a good day.
A hard good day.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know that's not easy. I mean, there's joy in it and there's pain in it.
Yes. for sure.
Worth it.
Yes, it was so worth it. I wouldn't trade it.
Mhm.
Yeah, very worth it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing about that.
Yeah.
I know that's not easy.
Mm.
And it makes me think about how even since then, and how that has created the opportunity for our friendship. And now with
Mhm.
Maggie coming into Zoweh, friendship with her and other women who are here. And I think about all that we've experienced and learned about listening,
Yes.
and the significance of practicing listening and loving through listening, and how that has made such a difference
Yes.
in the way that we move together.
Yeah,
And
hugely.
yeah, and knowing each other and learning our ways. And I even think about, even so recent as a couple weeks ago, when I just was feeling so overwhelmed. And I'm here in the office and there are all these men around, and there's us three women in the midst of this office of men. And it was a Monday. And when I say it was a Monday, it was a Monday. And I had it up to about here, and I was just overwhelmed and had no words for any of what my day was weighing on me and the crushing I was feeling. And my tears were like right there. And Maggie and Robin were here in our office with me, and I was just like, you know what, I'm out. I gotta go. It's just time for me to call it a day. And I'm closing the laptop because I have no more capacity for words. I have no more capacity for people. And I'm putting it in my bag, and the tears are coming, and I'm just like, I'm out. And it felt like such kindness to me that neither of them tried to hug me, tried to make me feel better. And it feels weird to even say that, but to know that my friends know me well enough, that the last thing I needed in that moment was anything except release.
Yeah.
Anything more than, bye,
Yeah.
see you tomorrow.
You go.
We love you, you go.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was such a kindness that they required nothing of me. I didn't have to say anything.
Mhm.
And we didn't get there overnight. I mean, that has taken the last several years, the last year with Maggie, the last several years with us.
Mhm.
So
Right.
there's something about taking that time to get to know each other.
Right. Right. And knowing when to engage and when not to engage. That
Mhm.
wasn't a time to
No.
Sharon, tell us more about that. Just
Tell us about your
wasn't.
tears.
Yeah.
How? I've got nothing more than a punch for you. Please leave me alone right now.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. We're learning how to do that better. And we're learning, like you said,
Mhm.
learning each other.
Mhm.
And yeah. And sometimes we don't do it well. Sometimes we miss each other and we don't do it well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to share that Dana wasn't feeling well tonight, and we miss her. We wish that you were here tonight with us, Dana. But we had, speaking of Dana, we had,
Speaking of missing.
speaking of missing and speaking of Dana, we
Mhm.
had, the three of us had such a great conversation about a month ago on her back deck.
Mhm.
And she was so very clear about some things that were very important to her.
Mhm.
And in our
So
yeah,
we
a
have
couple
things
weeks
going
ago,
on.
we have a lot of things going on and wanting to move things forward. We totally forgot the things that she had so clearly told us were important to her. And we proceeded without
Moved on
consideration of
without-
those
right.
things.
Right.
And so as we shared and caught her up and brought her into where we were just a couple weeks ago, just last week.
Last week.
Uh-huh.
It was a big week.
It was a big week. And thankfully, she had her feet about her to say, wow, you did what?
I thought
I was
I
really
was
clear about
right.
what was important to me.
Right.
And Robin and I were both like, oh no, we know that. We totally missed that.
Mm-hmm.
So having that opportunity to go back and say, Dana, we are so sorry. You are right. We totally missed you. That had to feel really crappy. You had to feel so missed in the midst of that. We are so sorry.
Yeah.
And for her to be able to respond and say, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that you missed me, that it hurt. I know your hearts are good. I know your intention is not to hurt me, but thank you for seeing that you did.
Right.
So that felt good.
Right.
From
to repair well.
Right. What could have stayed feeling crappy.
Right.
Ended up feeling pretty good.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to think, where do we want to go from there? So
We have about 10 minutes.
we have about 10 minutes left.
Mhm.
It's funny, we've been talking about this so much over
So
the last
much.
36 hours. It's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, so did we talk about that?
What have we
Nicole?
said already? Yeah. What was yesterday? What was this morning? What was?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Robin, in places in the past where where it's not felt safe to share,
Mhm.
why do you think that is? Why do you think in different groups it hasn't felt safe to you, or that you felt reluctance?
Yeah. Yeah. When we were talking about this, I was thinking about when I am struggling or grieving or burdened by something, I go inward. I think it's partly due to my introversion. I'm an introvert, and partly how my heart and my emotions were handled growing up. I think it's because, well, I know it's because I don't trust that my heart is going to be handled well, with care, or that my story won't be held well, and that my emotions won't be validated or tolerated, because I can tell story after story after story of how that was my experience, that those were not done well, that my story wasn't handled well, or my emotions, or where someone has tried to encourage me or try to fix it, which, as we've talked about, doesn't feel good, even though they're trying to, or they've tried to relate by offering their own stories, instead of entering into mine with curiosity and compassion. So I've decided it just has felt safer to hold it on my own, to suffer in silence, really, until really these past couple years. Yeah. But it's interesting how I feel like holding it by myself feels preferable to getting hurt again.
Safer.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just is further isolating. So I really think it's been these past couple years where, like you said, we're learning how to listen more in a loving way. We're learning what it looks like, what it means to share our stories more truly, and how to engage each other as we share ours. And so as I was thinking about this, I thought about last week, when the three of us had lunch, you and Maggie and me. And one of you asked how my weekend was last weekend. And I risked sharing something that was really weighing heavily on my heart, and about one of our daughters and my interaction with her. And I was really feeling regret over how I handled the situation that past weekend. And instead of you and Maggie sharing, like telling me all the things that you're sure that I would have done well, in hopes to help me, which leaves me still holding that ache. It doesn't help me to hear about all the things that I did well, but you both stayed in it with me, in my regret and in my sadness. And you asked questions. And I remember 3 things as I was thinking about this today. I remember 3 things, how that felt to me, how you and Maggie engaged me. I remember your faces, especially your eyes as you listened. And that really made an impression on me. It communicated that you were tracking with me, that you were staying with me and not leaving and trying to think of the next thing to say. That just felt like such a kindness, and it felt healing to me, just your presence staying with me in it. And then secondly, it really felt like you illuminated the situation for me by having your eyes on it and your ears, and the fact, like you said, that we are getting to know each other. And you named some really significant things for me that really brought that light, that illumination, things that I couldn't see. And that was huge for me. And then lastly, I just remember feeling grateful that I risked sharing with you both. So thank you for that.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Maggie.
And we were honored that you would share that you would invite us to see that. Because I think about too, that so often when you're in the thick of it, and you are in the thick of it, you can't see the forest for the trees. Right. So having friends who know your story, who know not just as you shared about what happened last weekend, but who know that in the context, know you and that situation in the context of the last however many years.
Yeah, exactly.
That it makes a difference to be able to name this that we see.
Yes.
And invite questions around it.
Yes.
So thank you for trusting.
Yeah.
For continuing the story.
That was so good. But I feel like, in the sense of community, how that matters, how that brings healing. That was such an example of how healing came and how God's provision for our relationships together, how he brings healing or the potential for healing in those exchanges, in those conversations,
in those moments where we choose to stay present with you.
Yeah.
And not try to fix or make it better.
Right.
But
Or
just
give
be
advice or say,
with.
I can relate. Me too.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not helpful.
Yeah.
So
How about you, Maggie? I know you're still here with us.
I am still here with you. It's interesting listening to you share that. And I want to just say also, I just loved that you felt comfortable to share that with us, Robin, last week. But for me and my story, I have experienced some significant friendship pain that has made me retreat in. And in those moments, or after those moments, I remember just thinking, who are my people, Lord? Like, who are my people? And really wanting, as we moved here a year ago, to be intentional, to put myself in the way of people, to find my people. And a couple of Zoweh friends, Laura, who's on this call, and Janine, reached out to me last January so that we could pray for our husbands when they went to a Zoweh event together. And we've been getting together over Zoom, but that's how it started. And I say that just because like a redemptive community doesn't have to be a super structured group. It can just be a real easy start in that way. And then as we have struggled, we'll just reach out to each other and hop on a Zoom or hop on a FaceTime. And a couple weeks ago, I was in one of those very raw moments where I couldn't see the forest for the trees, like you said, Sherry, and reached out, and having Laura and Janine take the time, they took a full hour out of like literally the middle of their day. And it wasn't like, Maggie, you have 20 minutes and I'll take 20 minutes and the next one takes 20 minutes. It was all about me, and it felt extravagant. And I just got to share, and they listened and they leaned in. They named my struggle, and what comes to me, as you were saying, the forest for the trees, as I was just kind of floating and spinning in the messy details of it, it's almost like they grounded me down. And I was able to reroute my roots that were flailing. And then they took time in the midst of that to pray with me and just take me before the Lord together. And it was just this powerful friendship. And to me, what you said, Robin, was exactly that it was a way of healing in community, and that I had been hurt in community. And this is like the reverse of being healed in community. And it was to me, it was exactly what redemptive community should look like. Just that grounding, healing, reflecting to each other what the truth is in love. So yeah. That's my story. So thank you, Laura.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love the fact that wasn't even like a small group. These were friends that you are getting to know and who are there for each other, present for each other. And I know when you shared that with us, you talked about the shift.
Yes.
Tell us.
There's been a couple times, and one was with Robin, but a couple times when a friend has listened well, and that time was that there's like a shift inside of me that feels like healing. And it feels like, and saying a shift is like a easier way to, because healing feels very vague, and just this healing comes in community. Like, what does that look like? And there's been this sense of shift. And in some ways it's that like going from my head spinning to being grounded, and like, I can take a deep breath in their presence, and I don't have to live in the fear and the trying to control and the anxiety, but it's almost a co-regulation if you think about it. Yeah. Like in their deep breath, I can take a deep breath.
Yes.
And so, that was the shift that I would feel.
I love that. Oftentimes that can help us connect with our emotions more deeply when they are so present and naming the things that they're naming and seeing. And so with you, and that co-regulation can help us tap into more of what we're feeling and kind of keeping us there. And like you said, grounding and where healing has the potential to come.
Well, and I moved differently after that. If I hadn't had that conversation, I would have moved. It was a parenting issue, and I would have moved with fear and trying to control. And instead, I moved the next day with that kid and just went out together and was just like, Lord, show me her heart. Help me understand her heart, instead of being in a place of control and fear. So it impacted.
And I'm thinking about, you just, as you were talking, you brought me back to last week. And even though I left and you offered me the gift of leaving without any requirements, anything, and it could have felt like no care, but for me, it felt like care even more when you both texted later that evening to acknowledge, to name some things, to offer what I needed in that moment. And even though it was only over text and it was the kindness of your release in this situation, I think about the shift that allowed me the space and the opportunity to take a deep breath and to have some perspective and to wake up feeling differently the next morning. So it's interesting to me that it didn't have to be in person. It didn't have to be in Zoom, because you know me, because you know my story and my heart. You were able to offer uniquely for me what would make sense to offer for me.
Yes.
That may not have been appropriate for anyone else in the world, but for me, that was such a gift and such care, and brought the opportunity for exhale. And I don't know that it was healing, but it was certainly care in a really messy moment.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Yeah. And isn't the Holy Spirit just the one that prompts and nudges and gives us the wisdom to know how to move? Or maybe we risk and we're not sure how it's going to go over, but we,
combined with time spent.
yes.
Right. So it's not just one or the other. It's time spent. You didn't reach out to those women, Maggie, because you just went on Facebook and said, oh, I think I'll message this person and this person. I mean, you had relational time with them. You had intentional time with them. So they knew some of your story. You had taken that time with them. And that made such a difference.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I can't believe it's already 8:30.
I know.
And so I'll just say that although we have talked about, but we've not mentioned necessarily the different tenets of redemptive community, which you can find in the Deepening Journey, and you can find on Zoweh. We can post the link to redemptive community on Zoweh, where you can see the ingredients of what we've been describing. Because I just want to wrap up in saying we're not created to do life alone. You know, Robin felt what she felt when the three of us were at lunch in community, because we were there, we were present to her. And Maggie got to feel that shift because she reached out to two precious friends who took the time to Zoom with her. And I felt that shift for me, although I was home by myself, because they gave me that release, they gave me that space, and they texted some things that were significant for my heart. So we got to experience the goodness of God in those moments through each other.
Yes.
Because it's what we're created for. We're created for that relationship, for community, for that knowing and being known, which is what we were offering each other, for intimacy with God and with each other. That we might taste that goodness of God in community with each other. So I'm curious, has any of this resonated with you? Are you perhaps feeling some of the hunger that Robin felt for community when she met with those, when she risked inviting those 7 women to join her at a restaurant to consider what it might look like to journey together this way? So if you're curious, I would just say that next Thursday night at 8:00, we're going to talk about all of this, the how-tos, the things that we might offer to help you embark on this kind of journey. I know that when Robin had shared about it at a deepening weekend, I was so intrigued. This was long before I was with Zoweh. I wanted this. I was hungry for this. And hearing her story about inviting those women, I went home and so very intentionally invited some women to join me in that kind of experience and journey. And I have not regretted a moment of the women that I've gotten to experience some really messy life with. So I hope that you'll join us next Thursday at 8:00, and Maggie will put that link in the chat for you for the leader Zoom. And not only will you get to hear from us, but you'll get to hear from some women who have led groups and who wouldn't trade their experiences for anything either. So,
did this pique your curiosity about how we are created to experience life in community? We've included links in the description for you to continue your exploration of redemptive sisterhood, the deepening journey, and leading a group. And we invite you to join us for our monthly Around the Table Zoom gatherings, where we invite you to share in the second half of the conversation. If you enjoyed this video, would you take a moment to like it, share it, and subscribe to Zoweh's YouTube channel? See you next time.